Welcome, everyone. This is Sean from VoicesLiveOn, and this division is Voices of Bourbon. And we are here in Indianapolis with two very smart individuals in the world of bourbon that have come up to visit us from Kentucky. And we have Steve and Donna Nally. And Steve is a master distiller with Bardstown Bourbon. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. Thank
Donna,
you.
how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
And Brennan, how are you today?
Could not be better. It's been a glorious day all around.
So the purpose of today is to get the backstories of them being involved in the world of bourbon, and also just kind of their personal lives and kind of what has brought them to the level of honor of being both in the Bourbon Hall of Fame. Is that also true?
That is
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'd like to start it out with, first off, individually, where were you both born?
Well, we were both born in Marion County, Kentucky,
Okay.
Lebanon, Kentucky. We were both born. You were born at home, and I was born in the hospital.
I was actually a home baby. I was born and raised right beside of Maker's Mark Distillery property,
Right next door.
and that right next door.
And you
so
became the master distiller.
I did.
Isn't that ironic?
It's kind of meant to be.
That is amazing.
Yes.
That is amazing.
It was
So-
in your blood as soon as you came
It was
out,
in
right?
my blood. Correct.
And if you don't mind me asking, what years were you born?
1951.
1951?
I was born in 1950.
1950.
Yeah.
Y'all look great.
Well, thank you. And your eyesight is.
2020, bro.
So,
okay.
as far as individually, did either of you have brothers and sisters?
I have two brothers and one sister,
And what are their names?
Smitty, Ray, and Lisa.
Okay. And,
And I have
Steve?
4 brothers and 1 sister. Ann is my sister, the oldest. CL, Dickie, Billy, and Mike.
Okay.
And I'm the middle kid. I was between the boys, and Ann is the oldest girl.
And so what were your parents' names and their occupations?
My father was Jetty Smith, Lottie Smith. My father worked at Barton Distillery
Okay.
for 30 years.
Love it.
So
And what was
I
his
tell
role?
everybody, he worked in the filtering and chiller system in that area.
Okay.
He worked with that Dalmatian earth, so which was
That's
not
crazy. So is that the first generation of your family to be in the bourbon distilling industry, or does it go
Not
back
really.
further?
good. My grandfather, back when they were doing the stills, he was a deputy sheriff, and he said his hardest thing he ever had to do was to bust up an old guy's still, because he knew
He felt bad about
that
it.
was
He
their
felt bad about
income. That was their life income. So.
That's interesting. So what year would that have been?
Okay, that would have been probably in the late 30s.
Okay.
Early
so
40s.
so after Prohibition is repealed.
Yes.
So like 34, 35 or
Yes.
something like that.
Yes.
Okay. What county? Right where you all was
Marion.
at?
Yes.
Marion
Marion
again.
County.
Marion, yeah, keep it at home.
And what schools did you go to growing up, both of you?
I went to a parochial elementary school, Holy Cross,
Okay.
and a Catholic high school for 3 years, St. Francis of Assisi. And my senior year, we went public, and we had to. And the county school was too small to hold us, St. Charles. So we were called St. Charles Extension.
Okay.
Now, Steve went all 12 years to St. Charles Public School. And we were very, very much rivals when we were in high school basketball.
Did you know him?
I knew of him.
Of him. Legend.
She knew
I
of
knew
me.
Already
of
a legend.
him.
She knew of me.
I
Good stories or
cheered.
bad stories?
Hated
I
me.
cheered for a St. Francis Falcon for 3 years. And when we went St. Charles Extension my senior year, the principal asked me, she said, "Donna, are you going to try out for cheerleading?" And I said, "I'm not cheering for a tiger. I've been a Falcon."
See,
And I
told
knew
you.
when I was cheerleading, I knew of him because he was a St. Charles Tiger.
Oh, that is hysterical.
Little did I know, years later, I'd be marrying him, but
So let's interject that real quick. When did y'all get married?
go ahead, dear.
It's 25 years ago.
November
25
27th,
years.
1993.
That's amazing. She's
Yeah.
really patient with you, isn't she?
Most of the time, yes.
So how did you originally meet? Like, where was you might have known of each other, but there had to be kind of the initial first meeting and first date.
Oh.
Well, we actually met at Maker's Mark. We both worked there and had worked there for a few years when we kind of got to know each other. So we met at Maker's Mark.
Was it when you were sampling?
No. Well, when I started...
The product, you mean?
When I started at Maker's Mark, I knew nothing about the making of whiskey. So for the first week, Steve gave all the tours in the distillery. And I did research and checking on all the background to be able to give the tours. And as time went by, whenever I needed anything, the plant manager would say, well, get Steve to help you, get Steve to help you. So we became, good friends and had a lot in common. And
Do y'all like to dance, or you like music, or what are some of your like co-hobbies that you really enjoy together?
yeah, we like to dance. Well, really, we like to just go to friends' house and hang out and drink bourbon.
This is why you're my new best friend. Should we start drinking some bourbon? Probably. I'm gonna put my mic down while I pour this whiskey.
So as you were growing up, as you're going through high school, and what type of jobs did you have as you were young?
As I was growing up, of course, we were raised on a family farm, so I had farm duties, that we had to do when I played sports. I would come home and do my chores. I would do my chores before I went to school. So, you had jobs to do. Once I graduated from high school, I worked on farms for people. Thought I wanted to be a farmer for a while, and I found out that was a very bad choice as far as income related.
Sure.
And then in 1972, I just, being raised next to Maker's Mark, I thought, well, I'll just go down there and see if I can find a job. So no thought of a career, and I went down there. I actually worked every job down there the first 15 years I was there. And then
Wait, how old were you when you started?
22.
22, okay.
I had just turned 22. And, actually, I was still 21. So I turned 22 in June. I started in May, turned 22 in July. So I was still 21. And in 1988, I became master distiller. And I've remained that position for 15 years. Semi-retired in 2003.
You had more work to do, didn't you?
I had more work to do. I wasn't finished, so the opportunity. Well, actually, I drove a grain truck for a local guy that delivered grain to distilleries while I was between jobs. And in 2007, 3 lawyers from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, approached me to come to Wyoming, build a distillery, get up and running on the market. So I went out there thinking that I'm way out in Wyoming. Nobody will know what the devil I'm doing. In Kentucky, well, everybody here knew exactly what I was doing out there. But anyway, I was out there for 6.5 years, got product developed on the market, and then the opportunity came to come back to Bardstown and oversee the building and putting together Bardstown Bourbon Company.
Right.
So I've been there since 2013.
So what are some of the similarities from what you learned from makers that you've been able to bring, as far as new techniques or even some old school ways that need to be instilled within the distilling process?
I think what really trained me or got my work ethics was the formality and the procedure at Makers. We had one brand, one mash bill, one label, so everything had to be done exactly the same thing time after time after time. I went to Wyoming. I did a little bit more, but still I was kind of basically developing one product.
Right.
Well, here at Bardstown Bourbon, you get to open your vision of things and try anything. And so we made, right now we're making 40 recipes.
40 different combinations.
Recipes.
That's amazing.
So, you get to broaden your horizons and try things and develop things and really proceed or really get some things going.
So if you were going to break down, the 40 different recipes into different types of categories, how would you kind of classify the different areas?
Well, you have bourbon, which has to be 51% corn plus other federal guidelines.
Okay.
And then you have whiskey. Well, all bourbon is whiskey, but all whiskey is not bourbon by those guidelines. So that's part of it. And then within that subcategory, you have wheated bourbons, rye bourbons. You have different percentages of wheated bourbon, different percentages of a rye bourbon.
Okay.
You have rye whiskey or corn whiskey or just a single grain whiskey. If you go below 51%, it's not a bourbon. So you have those categories also. So there's so many different, I guess, recipes you could say that you could develop, because if you change one part of it, you've changed the whole recipe.
Right.
And then we've also got into some finishing, which is for the most part done in conjunction with other companies. Like we have a Pfeiffer Pavitt that's out now that we developed with Suzanne Pfeiffer Pavitt, who's a great winemaker out in Northern California. Well, we went through some extra steps with her to develop a superb product that's on the market now.
Okay.
And it's absolutely delicious, by the way.
Do you have one that you lean towards more yourself, just because of your own flavor that you love?
Well, as a purist, I tend to lean towards the bourbons side of it. The fusion is good because it has some wheat in it, which gives it a little bit of a sweeter taste. The Discover is one that we developed not any of our product in. The fusion has 60% of product that we made. The Discover is one that we bought product, blended them together, and that's to kind of show the precise ability of us to blend products.
Well, and on the side of the label, we were talking about it earlier, so it's got that actual official breakdown. And so it's got the blend percentage, the origin of the whiskey, the age, and then the mash bill. So we were talking about transparency earlier today, and I think what's really critical is that you're sharing that information with the consumer so that they understand what they're getting themselves into.
And what the differences are.
Yeah,
Well, it's something
right. I
that-
think
They know
it's
exactly
important,
what they're drinking.
right?
Yeah.
And we know that there are other distilleries that were purchasing whiskey and not telling the consumers about it,
Right.
and they got themselves in a heap of trouble. It was not good for them.
Well, and it's something that, a lot of secrets, a lot of things have been hidden in the years past. I don't want you to know how I made it because I'm afraid you'll copy it. But the consumer is really intrigued about how it's made.
Right.
They want to know exactly what's in it. So, as Brandon said, we put on the side label exactly what's in it. Everything that we can is on there, the age of it, the mash bill, where it came from. If we didn't make it, it came from a Kentucky distillery, or it came from an Indiana distillery, or wherever it comes from. We want that to be known so that you as a consumer know that you know what's going on.
Do you think at this point right now, and y'all have been around doing this for a long time, consumers are more educated than they've ever been before?
Yes, because they wanted to become more educated.
Absolutely, and I
They
think
ask
part
a
of
lot
it,
of questions.
let's tie this right into what we were talking about with you earlier, the Kentucky Trail, and how you became instrumental in developing that to help educate people and train them on what makes it a unique spirit.
Well, a lot of people wanted to tour the distilleries. Not all distilleries were open for tours.
Mm-hmm.
But we felt that in order to bring people into Kentucky and let them know how Kentucky bourbon was made, that we start a bourbon trail. So Senator Ed O'Daniel, who was the president of the Kentucky Distillers Association, came to me and asked if I would help him. What really started it all was at a Kentucky tourism conference that myself, Peggy No Stevens of Woodford
Yeah.
Reserves, Doris Calhoun, and Jim Beam,
Yeah.
we all belonged to the Kentucky Tourism Foundation, and we were known as the Bourbon Ladies. We were sitting at the table the evening of
That's a great title,
The
by the way.
Bourbon Ladies.
Yes,
Cheers
we
to
were
that.
the Bourbon Ladies.
Let's raise these glasses for that. The
Cheers
Bourbon
to-
Ladies. I love it.
Be with one of the top bourbon ladies on the planet.
Well, I find
And
it
we
fascinating.
were talking that we already promoted each other for people, because all of our 3 distilleries had tours.
Sure.
So we promoted each other with our brochures and educating the people that will go tour this distillery, see how they make their bourbon.
Sure.
And we said, well, we ought to start a bourbon trail. And Senator,
Is that what you all said? You were like, let's start a trail.
Let's start a bourbon trail.
I love it.
We were the bourbon trail
Sure.
at that point.
Sure.
And Ed O'Daniel said, well, that's a good idea. Maybe we need to really get something going. So a few months down the road, he came to see me at the distillery, and we talked about it, and he came up with some designs for the brochure. I called all the distilleries and asked.
Because you had like first name basis with people, and you
Right.
could just say, hey, this is what we're doing.
If
you
you
should
want in.
participate.
Yes.
If you want to be on this trail.
Do you want to be part
if you
of the
don't
bourbon
want to be on
trail?
it, then we're going to hang out
And that's
now.
exactly
Right.
that's exactly right. But of course, they had to belong to the Kentucky Distillers Association. But many of the distilleries didn't. But at that point, they said, well, we would do it on phone calls, or they began to set up things and have where tours can come.
How
tours
many
could come.
potential distilleries?
At that time,
Let's
there
say
was
the
nine.
original. Okay, just
There were
nine.
nine
There was
originals.
nine.
Okay.
There was nine.
Well, how many potential ones? There were probably 9 on the list, but there's probably others that wanted to.
No, there was 9 in Kentucky at that
That
time.
was it at that
Gotcha.
time.
That- at
That
that
were
time.
operational.
Gotcha.
Yes, yes. And I got all the information on when they would be open, what people would see, who to call, location, and
Sure.
we came up with the brochure of each distillery that was located in the state of Kentucky and
When did
directions on how to get there.
When did y'all print that for the first
oh my
time?
gosh.
Going back in time.
Went back in time.
Was that before or after the Bourbon Festival?
Before.
Okay, then it would have been late 80s, early 90s.
So it's been around
early
longer
90s,
than I
wow.
thought.
Yes. But I mean, it developed.
Well,
It took
it's-
a slow steps in getting developed and the word getting around, because at that point, the brochures were only going to the distilleries to pass around themselves.
Sure, they weren't.
Or we had a vendor that would take it around to the different locations throughout the state. But it's grown in leaps and bounds now.
Well, now we're talking about the internet, right? You
Oh,
fast
yes.
forward to
Oh,
the
yes.
21st century, and we were talking about it earlier. Everybody's got all the
There
information
wasn't
they
any
want.
money for a lot of advertising.
Correct.
And even any money to actually hire the what we call the ad rack.
Sure.
And they had places throughout the state of Kentucky that would display that brochure.
Sure. That's intriguing
So,
to me.
and with Bardstown Bourbon, it's how many years? It's not too long. It's
4 now,
we've,
right?
only, we've only been in operation for 3.
Right.
Yeah.
So that, in comparison to the others that have been around for a while, what's the number now of, the organizations that are even on the trail?
I know.
I'm
You start
not
thinking
sure.
about the
And
number
there's,
going through the Rolodex.
is it
You're
a
like,
lot-
hell, I
is
don't
it-
even know.
I mean, just this is nationally, but just micros has grown to right at or over 2,000 right now.
Wow.
But they're,
Which is
they're not
incredible.
all
Yeah.
on the Bourbon Trail, but the bigger distilleries is probably 16 to 20. Now that somebody that's producing over 1 million proof gallons.
Yeah. And you guys are at 6.9 million proof gallons now,
Correct. Yeah.
which is huge.
well, it's
Well, I mean,
it's-
I guess in relative terms, right? I mean, it's not Jim Beam, it's not Heaven
Well,
Hill, but for where you guys started
if
and
you
picking
put it
up all
within
those
3
clients.
years.
categorized down, we're just about the level of Wild Turkey, just a
That's
little bit
amazing.
under the volume of Wild Turkey.
Do you have more of a variety of flavor styles than the others as well?
Yeah,
So you're moving faster, plus you have a more variety to
Four
pick up
Roses,
more.
for instance, I think they have like 5 mash bills.
Okay.
MGP has about 5 or 6 mash bills. Most of the other distilleries have 2 or 3, and that's about all they do. Nobody that I know of has 40.
No, that's amazing.
It really is truly sensational. And remember what we were talking about earlier. You guys have been able to go above and beyond to create these different brands and help assist labels that wouldn't have the capabilities to distill at your level, and are creating opportunities for consumers to try new products.
Well, and they, if you back up a few years, they were getting product that Jim Beam, Heaven Hill, Barton was making in excess of what they needed. Well, the market is so now they need everything they can produce.
Right.
So these people that were purchasing ran out of inventory. So we came along at the time that, hey, we'll produce this for you, but we will customize it to exactly what you want. if you want to be a part of it, you can come in and help produce it.
Sure.
And this gives them a home to come to bring their salespeople to market, whatever, to come in and say, hey, this is where it's made.
And the distillery is state of the art.
Yeah, I mean,
it's incredible. I mean, when you just look at the brochure, I said it earlier, I was like, it feels like you're looking at a Napa winery or something like that. I mean, it's that sensational. I mean, it's really aesthetically
Are there a lot of
pleasing.
people each day taking on tours?
We haven't developed a
ramping?
public tour yet.
Okay.
We're in the process of it. Probably the next 2 or 3 weeks we will be opening up
great.
to public.
And so it's right around the corner.
Yeah.
So go visit him. He
Yeah.
won't bring the distillery to you.
Yeah,
Bardstown Bourbon
tours
tours
come down.
on the trail.
But if you want to look back at last year, there was over 1.2 million people came through Kentucky for bourbon to see.
That's
the distillery
amazing,
and
isn't it?
see-
And to think about where
Indeed,
you
Bourbon
started,
Trail. Yes.
where she started, 9 distilleries in the 80s, and where we're at today
Well, and all
is
this started
fascinating.
at primarily Maker's Mark developed the first tour program. At that time, I was a night watchman, and I was working Sunday.
Did you carry a
days.
baton?
Yeah,
And a bottle.
and a bottle,
Right.
a
Smack 'em
straw
over
and
the
a
head
bottle.
with
He was
either of
checking
them.
all the bottled and bond warehouses.
But
shaking the doors, checking
I would
for
make
chains.
my round, and I would come around. There was a wrought iron fence around the facility. There would be people standing at that. Can I see what's going on in there? So I asked the plant manager one day I said, can I show them through? I said, they want to see it. Well, if you have time, you can. So it got to where every time I came around, there's somebody standing at the fence wanting to go through.
So that's how it began in earnest. It's just onlookers standing outside of the wrought iron gate
What a
fence.
free taste of it.
Is that like going to visit Willy Wonka for the first time? Right.
Yeah. Is Willie home? Can I see him?
Exactly. The schnozberries taste like schnozberries.
Yeah. So that's when they developed the program, and Bill Samuel's sister was originally the one that kind of started it, and then Donna came in and developed it to what it eventually is now.
So I would think because of, and I hate to use this term, but kind of being handcuffed to one exact style of bourbon, making it over and over and over with makers, and then coming to Bardstown, you're able to take the cuffs off and get creative. Out of all those years that you were sticking to making one formula perfect, there had been many nights that you went home, you're like, you know what, it'd be good with a little bit of caramel, it'd be good with a little bit of this, it'd be good with a little bit of that, right? Like in the back of your head, you're like, I got a job to do.
Yeah, but on the other hand, that gave me the precision of, because this temperature was done this way, this is the flavor I get.
Is
That
exactly
gave
what
me
came out.
Well, and
Right.
isn't there
the reasoning behind all of that process.
Right.
It truly was handcrafted.
And that's what I mean. And there's something to be said about that consistency too,
Yeah.
right? And I know a lot of my friends that are huge craft beer nerds like to mock the large backrow breweries. But if you drink a Budweiser here, or in Jamaica, or in England, or in Tokyo, it tastes the same.
Right.
And that's what Maker's Mark was striving to achieve every day too. You want that customer to know and rest assured it's going to taste that way every single time they open the bottle, regardless of where they're purchasing it.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about, the precision, right? You've got to dial that in to make sure that it happens every time again.
But now on this scope, we're doing the same thing with 40 recipes. We still want to make sure that it tastes the same.
Dialed in.
every
That's
time.
the level of consistency you want it to be
Right.
there too.
Precision transfers over to this to be able to
You
do
just
this.
get to set up a buffet for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, I just
Of
Yeah, it's a
precision.
lot of salt and pepper and some cayenne, and you got some basil, and you got some mint, you got some time. You're like cooking in the kitchen. You got a whole bunch
a
of
dash
But
of
it's
this,
ingredients
important
to
to the customer
that.
to make sure that they make their whiskey just like they want it.
Yeah.
Right.
And
from
Not everybody can do that.
from a business standpoint,
Yes.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I'm with you 100%. You don't earn those contracts by accident.
No.
Right, you have to have that relationship, and
Yeah.
they're paying you to get what they want as the end result.
And that was one thing that, we as a company had to realize early on was that I'm not making my product, I'm making yours. So I've got to make the flavor profile that you want. And that's where you get into a lot of conversations between you, is, okay, you want a little more fruitiness in it? Well, we need to dial this in or do this. So, that way you tailor it to that customer.
One, I think once again, about being very precise, you have to have those conversations with that panel from that company. How many iterations would you go through to create a brand like that? I mean, are you doing like a dozen, a half a dozen? Do you have to do it 15, 20 times to dial it in for what they want?
No, actually, we've done it on the first try.
That's how good he is, everybody. Drink his whiskey.
Well, we do enough investigating, enough talking that, you know, if you've been buying your product that you're using from company A,
Sure.
then I know somebody in that company that I go back and I'll find the recipe.
And you'll already find the recipe, so you already have it on hand, so you've already kind of got...
I've got an idea.
You've got an idea of where you need to be.
And then when we start producing, you know, while we're producing, you're there with me, and then we start dialing in to fine tune.
That's
But
awesome.
we start out basically with what you want. We just fine tune it to get the flavor profile.
I love it. We're going to need to take a break because I'm starving and these muscles are getting cold, right?
We don't want cold muscles.
That sounds good.
Pause for station identification. Brought to you by St. Joseph's Mussels.
Welcome back. This is Sean with VoicesLiveOn and Voices of Bourbon. We're here with Donna and Steve Nally, legends in the industry.
Without
And
question.
sipping and enjoying as we
It's the
enjoy
fusion.
this beautiful getting to know
Yeah,
session.
bring that in now.
So, something I find amazing is that they're married and they're both in the Bourbon Hall of Fame. I don't know how many couples on the planet can say they're both in any Hall of Fame. You know them? You know the other ones?
T.W. Marge Samuels is the other one from Maker's Mark.
it.
They're both
They're
deceased
both in
now.
the Bourbon Hall of Fame.
But they're deceased.
We're the only
They're
living
the only living.
That is
in the Bourbon Hall of
amazing.
Fame.
May you live
And
forever.
I'm just saying any type of Hall of Fame at all.
Oh,
Yeah,
From
whether
rock and roll to like whatever it is. I think it's beautiful. And obviously you got your start in the business before you did. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
not by long though.
Right. But two separate paths on what you were notated for being in the Hall of Fame for. Correct?
correct.
Correct.
So, Donna, explain the beginning of the path of what kind of brought you into being in the position to be able to be voted. What was the aspects of the company that you were helping and that you were driving to get basically to the point of being able to get inducted?
Well, first, it was my position with Maker's Mark. I started out there in November of 1978 as a part-time tour guide.
Okay.
I worked with Leslie Samuels, Bill Samuels' sister. And when they sold the company in 80, she left the company, and I became the director of tourism
Okay.
and developed the tour program. From when I first started, all there was a manila envelope, and I developed the tour program to several, over 30,000 people coming in a year, motor coaches coming in, really selling the tours for Maker's Mark. Joined the Kentucky Tourism Council within the state, serving on the board, spreading the tourism and the tour department for Maker's Mark all throughout the state. Then working with the Bourbon Festival. I was on the formation committee that actually started the Kentucky Bourbon Festival in Bardstown, and then working with Ed O'Daniel of the Kentucky Distillers Association in helping to develop the Bourbon Trail.
Okay.
And with me being in the forerunning of those three entities and building the tour program at Maker's Mark, the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, those were the three aspects that led me to be installed into the Kentucky Hall of Fame, Bourbon Hall of Fame.
How many people are even in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, wow.
We can Google that.
That I have no idea.
Well, I would assume there's not a lot. I would assume it's
Well, the
a
first
handful.
the
of-
first
of
year that there was
individuals.
the Hall of Fame, it was all the master distillers.
Right.
Then, as time went by, there was writers, legends of the bourbon industry, several that they had inducted into the Hall of Fame that had deceased. There wasn't a lot of women To my knowledge, and I'm not sure, I think Margie Samuels, and she was deceased, was one of the first women inducted into the Bourbon Hall of Fame.
Okay.
She was inducted in the year before I was.
Okay. So, and Steve, with how long had you been in the industry before you had the opportunity to be inducted?
Well, I started in the industry in 1972. I was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2007.
It's a lot of work.
So I've
Yeah.
been in a lot. And
It's a lot of time.
Really, the thought behind this induction is somebody that had promoted to the industry, somebody that had spent time in the industry, that had developed the industry itself. So that was the thought, whether it was master distiller, director of tourism, a writer, whoever, somebody that had some influence on the bourbon industry itself. And I think when I was inducted in, there was like 30, 32 people that was in it in 2007. So today there's just a guess is probably less than 100.
I'm looking at the website
Wow.
right now. It started in 01, were the original recipients.
Right.
So Parker Bean, Lincoln Henderson, Elmer T. Lee, Fred McMillan, Booker Noe, Jimmy Russell, Jim Rutledge, and Bill Samuels Jr. were the inaugural
Okay.
inductee class.
Right.
Your counterparts in 07, Edward Baker Beam, Gary R. Gayhart, Tom Moore, Jim Murray, and Ken Rapier. So, so I mean, if you're looking from 01 to there, you're about 30, 40 people.
Right.
We're in there. And
So at your home, do you have a display of the Hall of Fame awards?
Yes.
is it next to the bar?
It's
behind the bar.
It's behind the bar.
It had to be, right?
Actually, the symbol we got was a copper steel
Oh, was it?
with the worm coming down off of it with our name imprinted on the steel. So that's our plaque.
That's
Part
really
of
Yes.
cool, isn't it?
induction.
Let me ask y'all, we were talking about moonshining earlier. Did y'all ever distill before you worked for a distillery?
No.
I refuse to answer.
I will not
great.
myself today.
Well, listen, I think we're kind of coming to an end of being able to do this first session with you, and really appreciate the time. The VoicesLiveOn and Voices of Bourbon, and two Hall of Famers right here, and it's great to be able to get to know the backstory. And
It's great to be here.
yeah,
Oh,
and
we
we
really,
look
truly
forward to
appreciate it.
being able to do more with you. And now being able to be with Bardstown Bourbon and being able to expand all the product lines and everything, and kind of get the gloves off. I'm sure you probably give them some insight, back at the home, like, you tried that, but you might want to try it this way a little bit. Work as a team.
She's got a great
Right.
palate.
Right, that's great. But Brennan, I love you and I thank you, and
I love you.
appreciate this.
Guys, stay tuned. This is just the beginning, I think, of something that's so incredibly impactful. And this is just kind of like the subdivision that I'm going to kind of co-host and head up with Sean for beer, wine, and spirits activities and events and interviews with gracious humans like Steve and Donna. So raise a glass real quick. Cheers. Thank you so much for your
Cheers.
time today.
Cheers.
Cheers,
The
everybody.
Voices Live On.
Voices Live On.
And to Steve
Bardstown
and
Bourbon
Donna
Company.
Nally.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
for having
Thank
us.
you.
You got it.